The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll be splitting my time with the member from Willowdale this morning. I'm proud to rise today to speak in favour of Bill C-76, a bill that will empower more Canadians to vote and ensure that our elections are protected from interference, Mr. Speaker. This legislation will give more Canadians the opportunity to vote by reducing the number of barriers to casting a ballot, and it will limit interference by ensuring the integrity of our voting process. I'd also like to take the occasion today to welcome back to the House the Minister of Democratic Institutions, who has just returned to the House today after a mat leave, and congratulations to the Minister. Mr. Speaker, in terms of overview, let's turn back the clock to 2014, the year Stephen Harper's Conservative government enacted the so-called Fair Elections Act, and I put that in quotations for a reason. In a blatant attempt to secure re-election, the Harper government at the time sought to impede rather than enhance access to voting. That legislation made voting at the polls more difficult, Mr. Speaker. Amazingly, it even prohibited the chief electoral officer of this country from educating Canadians about the importance of getting out to vote. In addition to that, the Harper Conservative government made our elections longer and more expensive in a blatant attempt to crush opposing political parties by simply outspending them. Mr. Speaker, the self-serving rules imposed by the previous government should not be tolerated by any member of this House, regardless of their political stripe. They are the very reason why we've introduced Bill C-76. Mr. Speaker, thankfully, Mr. Harper's plan backfired. Rather than keeping voters away in 2015, they came out in droves to vote him and his party out of office. But in doing so, they also sent a very clear message that affronts to our democracy should not and will not be tolerated. I recall very specifically, Mr. Speaker, the campaign of 2015 and how the engaged citizens of my riding spoke to me about what they called the Unfair Elections Act, quote unquote. They demanded change. The folks in Parkdale High Park said that loudly and clearly to me, Mr. Speaker. I heard from those constituents. I communicated their concerns here in Ottawa, and our government is responding today with Bill C-76, legislation that will enable Canadians to come out and vote and prevent the manipulation of our democracy. I have two broad categories, Mr. Speaker. The first category is about access. As a fundamental principle, Mr. Speaker, our government believes in the notion of making it easier, not harder, to cast a vote. Unlike the Conservatives, we don't see a large number of people participating in elections as a threat to democracy. We see it as a manifestation of a healthy democracy. That means giving Canadians the tools to be able to participate in our voting system. All Canadians, Mr. Speaker, regardless of their background or their station in life. A participatory democracy means giving every Canadian an equal chance to obtain a ballot and to cast a vote. As the Parliamentary Secretary for Multiculturalism, I take seriously the issues of access and inclusion, Mr. Speaker, and I'm most proud of the fact that Bill C-76 will increase the ability of diverse Canadians across a wide array of demographics to participate in our democratic process. So allow me to explain. First, let's speak about Canadians who are low income. For those who may not have the wherewithal to obtain government-issued photo identification, Bill C-76 will allow voters to use the voter information card as a legitimate form of identification at the polls. This will ensure that fewer voters are turned away at the polls, allowing more Canadians to exercise their democratic right to cast a ballot in federal elections, reversing an aspect of the Unfair Elections Act. Second, Mr. Speaker, for Canadians who may not even have the wherewithal to possess a voter information card, we will reintroduce the old pre-Harper system of vouching. Vouching where one allows a registered voter to vouch for the identity of another person. Mr. Harper's legislation eliminated vouching, was strongly criticized at the time by the Chief Electoral Officer of Canada. In 2015, a whopping 172,000 people, Mr. Speaker, particularly youth and Indigenous persons, cited the lack of identification as the reason why they did not vote. We don't fear youth and Indigenous voices, Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House. We encourage youth and Indigenous voices. And with this change in Bill C-76, we will re-enfranchise such people. Third, Mr. Speaker, young Canadians. We are taking significant steps to increase their access and participation. With this bill, we will create a national list of pre-electors, so Elections Canada can pre-register Canadian youth aged 14 to 17 to vote. Elections Canada will administer the list and sign up young people to receive information about voting until they reach voting age. Evidence has demonstrated clearly, Mr. Speaker, that once a person votes, they are more likely to continue to vote in subsequent elections. Our goal is to help, not impede young people so that they make voting a habit for their entire lives. Fourth, Mr. Speaker, for Canadians with disabilities. We are taking vital steps to increase access and opportunity to cast a ballot. We currently have accommodations for persons with physical disabilities to vote from home. Mr. Speaker, we know that disabilities can be both physical and intellectual. To include more Canadians in the pool of potential voters, we're expanding the provisions for voting at home to any elector with a disability, irrespective of the nature or extent of their disability. The same concept would apply to transfer certificates. Right now, it is only a voter with a physical disability who can apply to vote at a different, accessible polling station. Under this bill, we will extend the same accommodation to those with intellectual disabilities. This is meaningful inclusion in action, Mr. Speaker.
C-76 goes even further. It puts funding behind initiatives to ensure that Canadians with disabilities can vote. This legislation will encourage candidates and political parties to take specific steps to accommodate voters with disabilities and to reduce barriers to their participation in the democratic process through funding to support those efforts.
For trans and non-binary Canadians, we are taking important steps to boost voter access and participation. Under Bill C-76, requirements to indicate a voter's sex on the list of electors or other documents is being deleted. For trans and non-binary Canadians, no longer will you be required to explain or confirm your gender identity at the polls before you are given a ballot. This type of measure will ensure that all LGBTQ2 Canadians are welcomed at voting stations and encouraged to cast a ballot. Sixth, Mr. Speaker, for Canadians abroad, Bill C-76 restores the access to the democratic process that Stephen Harper severed. Under the Unfair Elections Act, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Harper took away the right to vote for 1 million Canadians who had been living abroad for more than 5 years, a decision which prompted a charter challenge all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. The case is Frank versus Canada. It was heard on March 21st of this year. But, Mr. Speaker, our government is not waiting for the court to render its decision about the charter-protected voting rights of Canadians abroad. We're acting now with this legislation to restore such rights. We are saying to the 1 million Canadians around the globe in the 21st century, in an era of mobile work and mobile workers, your right to have a say in the election of your national government should not be fettered by the international demands of your employment. Seventh, Mr. Speaker, as I said at the outset, our government does not fear citizen participation in the democratic process. We encourage it. That is why, in the effort to improve access of all Canadians, we were removing what I feel was one of the most egregious instances of abuse on the part of Stephen Harper's previous government. Under that government's Unfair Elections Act, they actually prohibited the chief electoral officer of this country from educating adult Canadians about voting and the importance of casting a ballot. Not discouraged, Mr. Speaker, the Harper government actually prohibited the chief electoral officer from doing his or her job, from building civic literacy and educating Canadians about why it's important to participate in the electoral system. Mr. Speaker, I am as incredulous today as I was in 2014 when I first learned about this aspect of Stephen Harper's legislation. To prohibit a nonpartisan officer like the Chief Electoral Officer of Canada, of this country, from informing Canadians about the merits of casting a ballot in our system of government is nothing short of anti-democratic. It is at the very core of why Canadians responded so resoundingly against Mr. Harper in the 2015 election and why we are restoring such a basic aspect of the Chief Electoral Officer's duties with Bill C-76. My final point on access, Mr. Speaker, relates to Indigenous persons. It's connected to the broad measures we are taking under this legislation to facilitate more people being able to cast a ballot. The structural changes in Bill C-76 will make voting faster and less time-consuming, thereby increasing the number of Canadians likely to cast a vote. The changes include being more flexible where one can vote at a given polling station, enhancing the use of special ballots, keeping advanced polls open longer, and using mobile polls more frequently to reach those in low-density, remote, and isolated communities. The impact on access will be tangible, Mr. Speaker. We know that many Indigenous persons in this country live in more remote and isolated communities. By making this important change, we are empowering Indigenous persons' voices to be heard and counted within our democratic process. Mr. Speaker, the second category talks about the integrity of our democratic process. I think the bill speaks for itself in terms of placing important limits on things like the length of an electoral campaign and the power to enforce against breaches of the Act and electoral fraud. What I would conclude in saying, Mr. Speaker, is that the previous Unfair Elections Act passed under the Harper government impeded instead of improving access to the ballot box. As a government, we believe that when more Canadians vote, our democracy is strengthened, not threatened. That's why we've tabled Bill C-76, legislation that will increase access for all Canadians of diverse backgrounds to the ballot box. That's why I will be voting in support of this bill, and I urge all parliamentarians to do the same. Merci beaucoup.
Question.